a party which could claim a seat. And I owe it to Ashok Rao as to why the BJP was so keen on Maharashtra. When you take the total statistics that he sent me of over 4,000 MLAs in this country, only 1,500 plus were those of the BJP, that is BJP proper. Of all the governments, if you include the Northeast governments, 11 or so, only 6 are BJP governments. Now, why do they collaborate with the NDA? The answer is very simple. Because they need the money and the muscle of the NDA in case they force defections. This is not something in my mind or in your mind. It happened in Arunachal, where a chief minister committed suicide. How were they able to persuade, without that money and muscle of the BJP, how were they able to persuade a government to fall? Uttaranchal. How did they persuade a government to fall? And the High Court had indicated very clearly President's rule should not have been established. And today we have Maharashtra. What have they done to Maharashtra? Why do they want it? Why do they not say, Shiv Sena, you occupy this chair for 5 years, we don't care, as long as we are in power? Because the BJP wants to rule the third largest and most prosperous state in India. It doesn't want to give it to an ally. It wants to give it to themselves. Take Gujarat away and Maharashtra away, and you have the little kingdoms of the BJP. And they will topple any kingdom, because if they don't succeed in these little kingdoms, they have the money and the muscle. Karnataka. I was involved originally in the Arunachal case. The governor sent a letter after President's rule, Mr. Dhawan will not appear for us anymore. Take the brief, I was appearing free anyway. Karnataka, that total unholy mess that you see there, how did it happen? And what does the Supreme Court say now? The Supreme Court says all the defections were induced. Now put that aside for a little while, because I'll go chronologically, and let us see whether this chronology helps us to understand why the Constitution is in trouble today. The second event, of course, was the victory of the BJP in this massive election. What did it mean? Parties with power come back? Of course they do. But look at the president's speech when the House was called. Knowing that they are a majority government, knowing very well that they are a majority government, they decide, we will now unfurl an agenda which we could not have unfurled if we didn't have a majority in the Lok Sabha. And what is that agenda? Triple Talaq. Triple Talaq is an invalid, void action. Did you have to double it up and say it will now be a crime? Cognizable crime, which means you can be arrested by the police. Therefore, majoritarianism and to acquire a majority are two entirely different things. A majority was converted into the most odious majoritarianism that we know. And look at that agenda, because the sound of democracy was turned off. We have friends now. What happened to Indra Jaising? What happened to Amnesty India? The moment they said something about Babri Masjid, Amnesty India, immediately the troops of the FCRA went to them. So we go a little further. Do I need to explain to you? And I hope someday, somehow, somebody will tell all of you that how the media has been suppressed. There should be information coming out to you on that. Look what happened to my dear friend Indra Jaising. Her husband, Anand Grover, was a United Nations rapporteur on public health. He then spent some of that money on a ticket, and they said, this is FCR money, this is a violation. I know that the rapporteur in Malaysia, a dear friend of mine, Param Kumaraswamy, much sat upon by the government of Malaysia, traveled on money that they had received, and of course it was a matter of reimbursement. How did this come about? This came about because a mischievous Solicitor General supporting a mysterious organization called Lawyers' Voice on the 6th of May last year came before Chief Justice Gogoi. Now, of course, the case has been dismissed. But the reason for it was what? The reason was Justice Gogoi then said, you can take any steps you want according to law. The steps were to raid the Bombay office, to raid the Delhi office, to raid the chambers, and to upset people. Now, what does this in fact do to people? I'll tell you what it does. The effort of this exercise is not just an example of suppressing voices. The object of the exercise, and I have talked to many friends who have been made subject to this, is to make you lose your motivation to fight. Because that is the ultimate loss, not a censorship here or a censorship there. The ultimate loss is to silence activists so that these activists lose their motivation to fight. What happened to me in Babri Masjid, I'll tell you. There is Shakil Ahmed sitting there. Mr. Jilani and I were fighting this case together. In the middle of the hearing, the chairman of the Sunni Waqf board, who has a little FIR against him, and because he has an FIR against him, he is subject to the pressure of Adityanath. In the middle of that hearing, they wrote a letter to Shakil, sitting right here, and said, change the AOR, change the solicitor, which means change Jilani, who is really the superstar, by the way, of this case. I have very little to do with it. Because Mr. Jilani has seen this case right from the beginning, every day, in and out. He is the superstar. Jokingly, I tell him, you are the supreme leader. How can I possibly disagree with you on anything? Now what happens? It fails. But an effort being made, Yogi on the chairman on Shakil, and so Shakil came along. I said, you put this letter, let them come to the court, and let the court decide whether we should go out or come in. What would it have done to our motivation? You tell me. Because if that motivation is lost, forget the exigencies of free speech. If that motivation is lost, then everything is lost. And there are people sitting here who know how the motivation has been damaged and injured. I talk of some lawyers against whom this is done. I see them in tears that they have not shed for 40 years. And the object of the exercise? Lose any will to speech. Not speech, just the will to speech, the will to associate, the will to movement, all of that will be taken away. Now you might say, am I a reporter for Reuters that I'm giving you all this information? No, I'm not. This is the Constitution as it is working today. This is the Constitution. the constitution of a publisher, and I can see them there. The constitution as applies to lawyers who are all sitting there and without whom this case would not have happened. So the pressure is far greater than we understand it to be. Now, as soon as they started with this program, Triple Talaq, what is this business about conversion? Okay? Conversion is all right, as long as there's some conversion towards Islam or Christianity. But ghar wapsi is okay. Ghar wapsi is fine. And what is that if not an attempt to convert back? So, as we go through all these particular events, of which, as we run through them, a muscular nationalism. Oh, let it be muscular. I'm telling you, as far as I'm concerned, let me make my views on Pakistan clear. I come from the northwest frontier, as indeed my sister sitting here does. There are problems with Pakistan, and I'm not giving a flip to Pakistan. As far as I'm concerned, I, with Asma Jahangir, earlier Jalani, sat in a conference in which I said, Pakistan jeeve. Let Pakistan live. We criticize them for everything else. But if I say it now, and if there's somebody sitting here who will rush out and say, look what Mr. Dhawan has said, Pakistan jeeve. That is my view, and in my view, under our constitution and otherwise, this should be, in fact, the policy of India. I have no quarrel with the people in Pakistan. I have a quarrel with terrorism. And I quarrel with wanton terrorism. But if we want to make relationships out of our neighbors, then follow what the Constitution says about secularism also in your foreign policy. But you know, it goes a little further. I don't know, media people will tell you about Pegasus. It's not for me to comment on it. We have the sense, of course. But look at the lives that have gone since 2015. Pansare, Dabolkar, Lankesh. Now you can't have a secular constitution without a secular people. If people are being murdered because of their free speech, and pretty little is in fact being done about it. Look at cow lynching. You just kill somebody because you say that's the way it is. And what grounds is it done? On religious grounds. We know, very sadly, what this really does. Take a little part of a poem from Chandra Mohan, where he says, my harvest of poems will not be winnowed. It will come back onto the tray, become fire in the belly. This is how poets today feel. I want this to become a fire in my belly. I asked Viman Sundaram once, as he took me around one of his artistic creations, I said, Vivan, why is there no anger in our voices? Where is the anger that you saw in Spain in the 1930s? Where a huge arm comes out and holds people to attention. Where is Faiz in India today? Faiz is the poet of Pakistan because he's the poet of rebellion. We have to ask ourselves this question, and we have to ask ourselves this question again and again and again. Where is the story, I would say rebellion, I would say the story of revolution, according to the Constitution? It is in this strain that Sachidanandan says, pardon me for writing, but if you want to assert your rights, invent a god, invent a language, invent the alphabet. We don't have to explore too much into the history of meaning to know that we live in an interpreted world. It's a world where meaning today is not described by us. Meaning today is described by those in power in the Constitution. We have no control over it. And if we have control over it, there will be enormous difficulties as far as this is concerned. As we look through this, one notes with some pride, because this is history, in fact, dealing with the past. The Sahitya Committee. Look at what Nayantara Sehgal and all of them did, one after the other, one after the other, one after the other. If this is rule under the Indian Constitution as we know it, then we don't want your Sahitya Academy Awards. And what do people say? They say, oh, this is just nothing. It's a stunt. What do we want? I would like to build a monument to all those people who've been killed. Certainly I would like to build one to Muhammad Akhlaq. But I had an idea which I shared with Vivan earlier. Those stones in Babari belong to the Muslims. The land they have given away, but the stones in Babari belong to the Muslims. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not their spokesman, but I would certainly tell them that take those stones, get artists like Vivan and others to build this great monument of injustice that has been perpetrated. Now, what is this judgment as we see it? And then I'll come and say a few things about the Constitution, if you will permit me. Effectively, it is an order to destroy. It is a mandamus to destroy. Why do I say this? The reason is, assume that in 1992, the masjid was not destroyed, and it was still standing today. The title in 1992, according to this judgment, would have been with the Hindus. If that monument were standing today but for this destruction, the order of the Supreme Court properly read, in fact, means destroy it and move it. And that is something we have to understand about this order. Now, look at this judgment. Balance of probability. They say between 1528 and 1857, you have no evidence to prove that you prayed there. A waqf is a waqf. If tomorrow I don't pray there for a century, it doesn't cease to be a waqf. But the fact is that from 1528 onwards, first the Mughals, and then the Nawabs ruled there. Why on earth would there be, on a balance of probability, a masjid that was not prayed to when the Muslims were in power? Ridiculous. The reason, as far as this is concerned, is they say the Hindus, in fact, had complete access to the whole site. How is it possible? And at least the outer courtyard. Well, in order to reach the inner courtyard where the Muslims used to go, you have to cross the outer courtyard. So the choice is a very simple one. The mosque was there. It's a walled mosque. It was owned by the Muslims. And an 1885 judgment says that as far as the Hindu right is concerned, they cannot build a temple there. And all that the Hindus had was a prescriptive right of prayer. They reversed it. They said Hindus owned this walled mosque, which they had nothing to do with. Why? Because some gentleman called Tiffinala said that he had heard they pray there. I was asked this menacing question by Justice Chandrachud. Well, according to Professor Irfan Habib, he is not a great traveler, as the Supreme Court says he is. He is, in fact, a nobody. So, Tiffenhaler says that the Hindus prayed there before 1857, and therefore, it was Hindu. I mean, the sheer ridiculousness of this argument is only there to be seen on the surface of the judgment without going there lower. We were able to prove what did they actually want out of this. Swayambhu. They said the whole area is in fact Swayambhu, it's a god. I said it's not a juristic personality, and that was the end of that. I tell you what I think exists today. Two questions. I don't know what the Sunni Waqf Board have decided today. I'm told that with one dissent, they have said that they will not file a review. It makes no difference. Because there were 8 petitioners. This was an Order 1 Rule 8 case. Order 1 Rule 8 says the Muslims were in their representative capacity and the Hindus were in their representative capacity. By the way, I put these aside because I learnt in court, if you speak like this, like, dancing musicians, then nobody actually hears you. You just hear echo. So, at the end of this process, you'd please tell me, what is it that we have to do? Why do I want a review filed, which is my right under the Constitution? Now, maybe some people on this side, not meaning this metaphorically speaking, support the judgment. Some people on this side don't support the judgment. Review is a way in which the people who were before the court will state their problems with this judgment. It is the only authoritative way in which the Muslim community can tell the court, not the media, but the Muslim community can tell the court, by the way, this is wrong with the judgment. This controversy should come to an end. If the Sunni Waqf Board, under pressure, and I've indicated the kind of pressure it would be, doesn't want to file a review, let them not. M. Siddiq, the lead, he's from the Jamiyat, I think Mr. Maqbool's client, he's going to file. So are the others. And why do they want to file? They want to file because I think the people of India have a right to know that as far as these people are concerned, this is why they say that the judgment is wrong. It will be an authoritative statement on record, not a statement in a newspaper, not a statement in a television program. It will be the authoritative statement which will be on record. And I don't really care whether they throw out the review or they don't. I heard a little whispering lullaby that it is possible that they will entertain the review. Well, better still. Better still. But why do people not want a review to be filed? Peace. Can there be peace without justice? Can you ever accept a peace without justice? It's simply not possible. That is the kind of peace, and that is why I started with Balakot and Uri. That is the kind of peace that is now being attached to Article 19, the free speech movement provisions. The next question is, do you take that site? Why do you want 5 acres? People say, no, it's a symbolic gesture. Who wants that site? To borrow from the Old Testament? I think the Muslims have told me. I would tell myself this again and again. I don't want their birthright taken away for a mess of pottage. Don't take the site. But unfortunately, this is in the hands of the Sunni Waqf Board. because the court has said, you take the site. There is still, as far as the Babri case is left, there is still something to be done about it. And it's not a small something. It is something that reflects on our secular fabric. Now I will explain of how I view the Constitution. In this book, I think actually Prabhat didn't like the book very much. If you read his review. After that, I put it at the corner of my library and said, if Prabhat doesn't like it, and the only other person who read it is that fellow there, and he read it in draft. So it's a book that has actually, it shouldn't be totted around, but I'm going to do it anyway. In my analysis of the Constitution, there are two texts to the Constitution. The first are the political texts. The political texts of the Constitution are your elections, your parliament, going all the way up to the cabinet. And the custodianship of these texts belong to our political rulers. But there are another set of texts in the Constitution as well. I call them the justice texts of the Constitution. The rule of law texts, the justice texts, the transformative texts, they are all under the custodianship, I'd like to believe, to all of us. But the ultimate custodianship of the justice texts is with the Supreme Court of India. As the Supreme Court failed us, unfortunately, again and again and again. So when I think you people said, let us not speak to empty chairs, I've spent 25 years of my life speaking to empty minds, so it actually doesn't make any difference to me. But what have they done with the justice texts of the Constitution? Have they obliterated them? We've seen a series of cases, and that is why I say the distilling factor is 2019. What did they do to the CBI, that famous cage parrot? They knew they had done something wrong. So what does Chief Justice Gogoi do? He says, look, I'm sending Justice Sikri and you can appoint somebody else. What happened in all the activist cases that went before the court? What happened in Arunachal? What happened in the simplest and simplest of matters? What happened about corruption? I think there is a political corruption also every time a defection takes place. And I think it is a corruption under the Prevention of Corruption Act. Why? Because you are doing something contrary to law and inducing somebody for the benefit of that somebody. That is 420 or rather 416 of the IPC. Now, what are we faced with as far as the texts of the Constitution are concerned? What we are faced with is a total takeover of the political texts. You call it a democratic, all right. But democracy doesn't stop at an election. There is a democracy in elections and a democracy. Tell him I'm busy, I won't take the call. Democracy begins after the election also. If we think that the political texts of the Constitution are exhausted in an election, then the very concept of a democracy disappears. And what have we seen after this? We've seen pressure on the media, pressure on activists, pressure on lawyers, pressures across the board, pressures on Muslims. I'll tell you, it's a simple thing. When I talked to Professor Habib, when Rajan, gave the phone to me. And I said to him, the Muslims must do X, Y, and Z. And he very rightly said, the Muslims are a frightened community. I don't want to use second-class citizen, third class, etc. And I told my instructing counselor a little story. Next to my house, there is a park, which we call the Tinkonia Park. I found that as far as the New Friends Colony part of it was concerned, the gates were open for us. But when I found that the other gate, which was to the Muslim colony, they said, "Band hai." I asked the gardener, the Mali, "Why do you do it?" And his answer was, "Ye sale Pakistan hai." Now, I'm not on the rhetoric of his reply. I stopped walking in that park. I sent it to all the authorities. I said, I'm not going to walk in this park until the gate is open, and mercifully the gate is open now. But I talked to the kids there. I said, why don't you go to school? Why don't you, you play your games? Why are you smoking here? And they said, hamare liye kya rakha hai? I'm not saying it, in an emotional sense. I was trying to add experience to this little sentence that came from Irfan Habib. A fear somewhere that nothing is going to come out of it and nobody will come to our defense. So forget about the sacrileges. After all, what did Justice Chandrachud in a minority decide in the Representation of People's Act case? It was a 7-judge bench. 4 judges, they had to interpret the words, you cannot appeal to religion of their religion. Majority said this is all nonsense, led by Justice Madan Lokur. Said, what do you mean their religion? There should be no religion in elections. Simple. Justice Chandrachud, Goyal, Lalit decided, no. You can, if you like, talk about your religion. In other words, I'm a Hindu. I can talk till the cows come home and make appeals on that regard. But as far as the Muslim religion is concerned, if we don't talk about it, it's fine. So when I say that the justice texts have been tweaked and tweaked and tweaked, that is a cause for tremendous concern. But there has been a tendency on our part, in what could be called classical constitutionalism, to find 2 answers for democracy. The first answer has been that the political texts are located with the Prime Minister, the Cabinet and Parliament. You concentrate on those political texts. If you have any problems, go to Sitaram. He will take it forward. Then, if you have problems with the justice texts, you go to the judiciary. So the 2 guardians become, the Mai-Baps of the Constitution become either the power of the people who are the custodians of the political text or the power of the judges. Now this is, in my view, an entirely mistaken view of the Constitution. Shalin, Rabato. I'm going to give you 4 scraps of paper, if you don't mind. Kahan hai main? Bato. Just distribute them. आप लोग मदद कीजिए, हमारी इतनी मदद कीजिए, इनकी भी करिए सब. While this is being done, I'll continue. In the classical view of the Constitution, relying on social contract theory, we have surrendered our power to our rulers. This is well known. It was drilled into our heads, when we were at university. And that is why the book that Prabhat I don't think liked very much is called Miracle surrender hope. That we have a constitution today is a miracle. Israel doesn't have a constitution. New Zealand doesn't have a constitution. England, they have now, of course, put in the Human Rights Act of 1998, and they've changed the Terms of Parliament Act. They don't have a constitution. Pakistan's constitution came in 1956 and was destroyed in 1958. And the judges in Doso's case in Pakistan said, oh, the whole system has changed. They relied on some Venetian chap who said the Grundnorm has changed, everything has changed, so it's fine. And of course the constitution continued. Some modification was made, very rightly so, by the bravery of a then student called Asma Jilani, who filed a case in 1969. She later is known to us as Asma Jahangir. Now, these changes finished with Begum Bhutto's case. It's happened in Nigeria, it's happened in Ghana, it has happened everywhere. We are lucky that we have a constitution at all. If tomorrow a constituent assembly meets, we will not be able to agree on a constitution. This is what we have, and this is what we have to work with. It doesn't matter what has been done to the political text, in which I include the administration and the justice text. My understanding of the Constitution in our time in 2019 is the Constitution is a site of struggle. Not necessarily a site of welfare and justice. It is a site of struggle. We don't just go to Parliament as the custodian of the political texts. We don't just go to the court as the custodian of the justice texts. Every part of our civil liberties in Article 19, 21, 20, 40, every single area. I've learned such a lot from Ashok Rao when we worked on the dismantling of the public sector. Were we right when in the WTO campaign on a decision, we jammed the email of the Prime Minister? Just jammed it. To my mind, that is a site of struggle. Therefore, we have to invent this top-heavy constitution, which gave us only two custodians to say this constitution does not belong to them. It belongs to us. And how is it that we are going to retrieve this constitution? Let me just take you to these pieces. See, this is, the first one is the preamble. We, the people of India, etc., gave all this to ourselves. In this Constituent Assembly, 26th day of November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact, and give ourselves this Constitution. Turn over the page. This is my version in the book, and why there has to be a retrieval of the Constitution. We, the people of India, and that is the reality. We, the people of India, who had little say in the making of the Constitution, but were represented by people selected without mandate, have been informed to accept this Constitution lest there be chaos. We realize that our Constitution, part of which is a British India clone, makes unreal promises about justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, sovereignty, socialism, secularism, and democratic republicanism. We have no choice but to accept this arrangement, which the Constituent Assembly declared on the 26th of November 1949. Then is a promise that at least I will make to myself. We promise we will overcome any attempt to oppress us by and through this giant which our leaders have given to themselves to rule over us. We will overcome. We have to turn this constitution upside down. Now let me make good what I've said in the beginning. Kindly turn to the last page. The Constitution took 2 years, 11 months, and 17 days. Do you think Parliament has this kind of time today? When I wrote my book on President's Rule, the most elaborate discussion was on the Kerala President's Rule of 1959. After that, it has all become mechanical. I'm appearing for the People's Conference, but it will turn out to be a farce because I don't have faith in what the judges are going to decide when this hearing starts on the 10th of December. But consider how discussions take place in Parliament. Why has the Triple Talaq Bill not gone to a select committee? GST went because they wanted it. Why is the matter of the entire rewriting of the labor law, the ultimate empowerment that our workers, etc., had and our people have, why is it not being examined in finite detail? Because the political texts are in the hands of people who know they have a majority. The majority becomes majoritarianism. Now let us see how many members there were. 389 members originally. There were 299 after they went to Pakistan. The amendments tabled were 7,635, and the amendments discussed and disposed of were 2,473. We won't get another constitution. We're not going to get it. We live in a global economy where any time somebody makes some kind of change, what happens? This great imperial power of our time will send troops, withdraw troops, whatever they will do. So this is the Constitution, and now come to the second last page. The top is a cartoon from today. This is We the People. Remember that famous speech of Ambedkar's? We have given political equality. But if we cannot give economic equality, this entire fabric of the Constitution will fall down. Now, can you run an economic policy? Because our Constitution, by the way, was a Constitution founded on love. Borrowed from here, there, and everywhere, it doesn't make any difference. The Constitution today, as it is being administered, is based on hate, majoritarianism, suppression, division. Now, how do we retrieve the Constitution? The second, by the way, is really from a publication of mine called The Amendment, which was published in 1978. Chap goes to the government bookstore and he says, "Can I have a copy of the Constitution?" And he says, "Sorry, we don't sell periodicals." Now somebody converted this Constitution at their convenience into periodicals. And today they have a power. It is that power that was used in Kashmir. Hardly any debate whatsoever on the 6th August Act that was enacted. Now at present we have a very strange situation in Kashmir. We have two constitutions. We have the Jammu and Kashmir Constitution, which took 7 years. That cannot be destroyed. And we have the Union Constitution. If I say Indian, somebody will say, "What a horrible man you are." We have the Union Constitution. Suddenly, an entire constitution has disappeared. Why? On the writing of two orders by President Govind. On the 5th of August and the 6th of August. It's gone. The great province has disappeared. The Constitution has disappeared, except it's still there. I really want us to come back and align to a constitution which I believe was made on love. We're not concerned with absolute figures of poverty. I remember certainly when I was in Cambridge, and I think you were there at the time. Question is of relative poverty as well. It's the differences, it's the differentials that destroy a nation. We will deal with relative poverty, but how long can you sustain it? Now, whether Mrs. Gandhi brought into this constitution socialism and secularism, we are a secular constitution, except that we have to fight for it. We are a socialist constitution, not in the clause 4 sense of the Labour Party constitution, which is now gone, that we must nationalize everything. We are a socialist constitution. Without redistributive justice, it cannot take place. But how do we get this all back when this great country is up for auction? And I have only this to say. This is not their constitution. It is our constitution. Power structures, this constitution is not founded on power structures, on the two custodians that I spoke about. It is a constitution where the situs of struggle is no longer just Parliament or the courts. The situs of struggle has to be in every administrative office, in every decision-making body, out in the streets, out in the newspapers, out in the media. And unless we retrieve this constitution, where today, as we have seen in Karnataka, Maharashtra and Kashmir, federalism disappears at the drop of a hat. Democracy disappears. You know, I've often wondered, if you can have parliamentary democracy at the center without president's rule, why can't you have it at the states? The British imposed it in 4 provinces, including, I think, when the Congress, and you're the expert on it, when the Congress ministries resigned. Why do we have president's rule? Why? Because no assembly can function in that particular state. It is the ultimate denial of democracy.
I can't speak more than I have, but I was thinking this movie about Ayodhya, and I was saying to myself, कितना बदनसीब ये सुन्नी माँ, कितना बदनसीब है सुन्नी माँ, उस पत्थर की गुंबद से ही नहीं हुए इस राम राज्य। That is the struggle in my view. What is right and what is wrong. Nothing can be taken. But thank you. Not a difficult one. Right, okay, I have a question. May I ask you a question? No, I don't need to like that. No, we need it for the body. What the body? Okay.
to hear me, they don't need to see me. All right, now, my question is not really about the lecture. It is more about this document which you have annexed at page 2 of these documents which you circulated. Now, you say here, we the people of India who had little say in the making of the Constitution. Now, I understand, of course, that you are referring to the fact that the Constituent Assembly was made up, yeah, it is again. Yeah. So I understand that you're referring to the indirect election process as a result of which the Constitution. No. I understand. I understand that. You are referring to that. Yeah. Now, my point is that the assemblies themselves were also a product of a mass struggle. The vote may have been limited in its own way, but the ultimate product and the members of the Constituent Assembly, I don't think anybody really, in a political sense, doubted their representative capacity. In a legal sense, yes, but I would not say that in a political sense their representative capacity was doubted. They were giants in that Constituent Assembly. And this kind of a remark can actually give credence to any current effort to undo the Constitution. So I think you ought to be somewhat careful about, making such a sweeping remark. And if one does look at revolutions across the world, they are not the result of any adult franchise. I mean, one can go into what the Red Army was, nobody, I have not come across any study of the composition of the Red Army in the Soviet Union or of the composition of the Maoists in 1949. So, there is a political basis for the Constitution, for the representative capacity of the Constitution. That's the one point I wish to make. The second paragraph, when you refer to British India clone, a lot of it being a British India, that's the usual thing that is said when Government of India Act 1935, and this is based on that. Yes, it was. But the crucial element is the introduction of a adult franchise, which the verbiage of the Constitution may be taken from the Government of India Act to a large extent, with our additions and so on. But the introduction of adult franchise, without discrimination of gender, makes a world of a difference. And the huge experiment that is made in democracy with adult franchise in 1952, unprecedented anywhere, in the world. That is something that we should recognize and respect. So I was just going to say that, please, no, I'm not going to move on. I would say that I would move an amendment to scrap the first two paragraphs.
It's too late. It's gone into a book. And I stand by it. And I stand by it. Because, and it's a very simple, if you have read the Constituent Assembly debate, compromise is written across the board. So, just be a you talk, I answer, I talk, you listen, no. Rules of the game, dear boy. Stop hanging. No. Listen, after that, it's like Bangkok ghost standing there. Okay, now let me answer it. All confirmed. One of the things in this case, they said the Constitution is a Hindu Constitution. And I have to place the debate there when Munshi and others said that the preamble to the Constitution should contain a reference to politics. Okay? If you read the property debates, the answer is very simple. In one sense, the Zamindar won. Okay? Adult franchise. I'm talking of the Constitution in 2019. It is a constitution in which every election, money and muscle plays a role. Anil, I'm not knocking this constitution. I've already said I accept this constitution. And having accepted this constitution, I want to turn around the British law. You know that in the 19th century, a MP could not make a, only at the hostage could he make a speech. Now, when Nehru arrived in 1962, he stopped the date 70. He said it to a reporter. He went in and there was a parliamentary motion against it. They apologized. So what I'm saying is, this clone that we are accepting is a clone which is top bottom. And therefore, I say the clone is there. We have to turn it down. Alright? I'm not saying there aren't liberal elements in the Constitution. There are. Look what happened to procedure established by law. I've heard you arguing this in the Supreme Court on a vacation. How did it become this law? You know, because of the justice system. How did this periodical, as it were, get subject to the basic structure of it? It doesn't matter whether party or party. The question that I'm saying is, this constitution, liberal though it was, with some reluctance, they put in all kinds of, and this is what Bhagat said. He said, you've given us a constitution, and you put everything in the fundamental right chapter to underline. But that's not the point. Now, my view is all constitutions are created in context. All of them. You know that the 16th Amendment to the American Constitution was to abolish the tax. Okay? Once you have created a constitution which has liberal elements in it, which has fascist elements, presidency rule is an exercise in fascism. There have been so far, I think, 110 or 111 presidents. The longest one, by the way, was in Kashmir for 6 years. The Jammu intervention. Therefore, I receive a constitution as it comes. I operated as Pandit Nehru did with a lot of love. But the top model was always there. The top model led to the emergency. Therefore, to say you want me to amend those two paragraphs is like saying, could you take your speech and throw it into the dustbin? We inherited a model that has to be changed. Yes.
Anil, maybe it would be better if this discussion is carried out outside, because there may be some other questions. You probably have this discussion every day. Rajeev Dhavan.
I have great respect. I have tremendous respect for
राजेश साहब, हजारों साल नरगिस अपने बेनूरी पे रोती है, बड़ी मुश्किल से होता है चमन में भी दावत पैदा। आप यकीनी तौर पर मुल्क के लिए मील का पत्थर साबित हुए हैं, आपको मुबारकबाद। और उसके साथ ये कि लाख मौजों में घिरा हूं आपकी तरफ से है। सवाल इससे बात है, लाख मौजों में घिरा हूं अभी डूबा तो नहीं, मुझको साहिल से पुकारो कि मैं जिंदा हूं अभी। कब्र से आज भी मोहसिन की आती है सदा, मोहसिन मतलब एहसान करने वाला। कब्र से आज भी मोहसिन की आती है सदा, तुम क्या हो मेरे यारो कि मैं जिंदा हूं अभी। तो आपकी तरफ से जो पैगाम पूरे मुल्क के लिए और खासतौर से मुस्लिम कम्युनिटी के लिए भी गया है, मेरा सवाल यह है कि आपने अपने बाद, पहले तो ये कि अल्लाह आपकी उम्र में बरकत दे, लेकिन आपने अपने बाद कौन सी ऐसी टीम तैयार की है जो भारत के संविधान को बचाने का प्रयत्न कर सकती है? कोई की भी है या नहीं? Have you got सर, मैंने हिंदुस्तानी लैंग्वेज में बात इसलिए की है कि यहाँ जी बस यही सवाल था कि आपके बाद कोई ऐसी टीम आप तैयार कर चुके हैं? टीम आपके फॉलोअर्स जो इंसाफ, जस्टिस और इक्वालिटी की बात देश में कर सके।
इसका जवाब जो है
एज जस्टिस,
इसका जवाब बड़ा सिंपल है। मेरी कोई टीम नहीं, आप समझ रहे, मैं इनकी टीम में शामिल। और ना मैं एक टीम बनाना चाहता। जब प्रभात साहब केरला में थे तो बहुत से अनेक कानूनी प्रश्न इनके सामने आए। इन्होंने मुझे सब पूछा, मैंने उसका जवाब, मैं किस टीम में था, इनकी टीम। अगर आपको पूरी सफलता इस संविधान से मिलनी है, एक टीम नहीं होती, हजारों टीम होती, और वो साथ साथ काम करेंगे। क्योंकि अगर ये हम टीमबाजी में आ जाएं कि ये लीडर है, इनकी टीम में कौन है, मैं आपको बताता हूं, 2 लड़कियां थी इस टीम में, आकृति और गोलर। मैंने इससे बड़ी बढ़िया टीम के साथ कविता उनको हर अंक इस देश का मालूम था। तो ये जो आप कह रहे हैं कि लीडर और टीम, ये मेरे समझ से बाहर। हमारे इधर ये कितनी टीम के साथ काम कर चुके हैं, कभी लीडरशिप तो उन्होंने नहीं मांगी ना।
यहाँ लीडरशिप की सर बात
ये जो है, हम तो टीम में शामिल हैं। देखिए एक प्रॉब्लम होता है मिडिल क्लास गवर्नमेंट एजुकेशन लोगों का, कि वो समझते हैं कि हम टीम है। और इनका असली जो हमारे मालिक थे इलाहाबाद में कहते थे, आप लोग बाबा नहीं, बाबा लोग की टीम नहीं होती, आप समझ गए। टीम बनेगी कौन, कहीं और से नहीं बन सकती, और ये बनाना कठिन है। और सब लोग जिन्होंने टीम के साथ काम किया है, इसीलिए मैं टीम की बात कर रहा हूं, तो जानते हैं कि टीम कैसे बनती है। एक बार उनकी माँ ने उनसे फोन कर, हमने कहा कि आपको मैसेज देना है, तो उन्होंने कहा क्या मैसेज है। तो मैंने कहा आंटी जी मैसेज ये है कि सुनील को उन्होंने गिरफ्तार कर दिया है और ये नहीं देंगे। तो उनकी माँ ने मुझसे कहा, अरे वो तो अक्सर जेल जाता है, कौन सी टीम की, ठीक है। तो अगर हम टीम और लीडर्स के बारे में सोचेंगे, लीडर होंगे। देखिए कोई केस मैंने नहीं लड़ा है ट्रेड यूनियन की तरफ से या पब्लिक सेक्टर की तरफ से जिसने हमको ब्रीफ किया है, उसने हमको कुछ सिखाया है, उन्होंने सिखाया, कानून सिखाया, क्योंकि वो रोज उसमें निर्णय करते।
सर, प्रियम्बल और कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को जिंदा रखने के लिए हम जिन लोगों से राब्ता करेंगे आपके बाद, ये बता दिए देशवासियों को आपके पास कौन है। उनके नाम सुमित जी आ गए, सुमित जी को तो हम भी जानते हैं।
लोग हैं, आबादी देखिए हमारे देश की, इस देश के स्ट्रगल का आप लिटरेचर पढ़िए।
थैंक यू।
ठीक है ना, आप केरला से लेकर शुरू करिए आज तक, जितनी मैं ट्रांसलेशन में पढ़ सकता हूँ पढ़ें, और आप देखिए कि दलित लिटरेचर में क्या लिखा है और टीम लीडरशिप कैसे बनती है।
थैंक यू। यस
sir, thanks for that brilliant speech. It clarified some of the dilemmas that we're all facing. I have 2 questions. One is that looking at, as you have over the years, the status of judiciary, what do you think, how do we reform the judiciary itself? And linked to that is, did you never think of becoming a judge yourself? The second question is related to the case. The verdict which holds that the demolition of the masjid was an illegal act and so on. Is there anything that can be used from this case on these lines to then ask for more remedies or fast track in those cases?
As far as that question, I never wanted to do that.
two refugees, one on my nose, one on the top of my head. Nine stitches and 13 stitches came as a consequence of my being beaten up in race relations in India. I never saw myself as a leader. I was put past that. As far as the judiciary is concerned, I've already indicated to you that everything that this constitution has created, including its institutions, like the judiciary, is an arena of struggle. It will remain an arena of struggle. And therefore, I don't lose hope. We will keep fighting. These lawyers here, all of them, they will keep fighting until they turn this arena around. And the question is, will they turn it around? I don't know. I hope they will. Will I assist in that process? The answer is, of course I will. And you too.
The second question was about the Babri verdict and.
Look, the Babri verdict has come. I have an immense disrespect for it. But I have to accept it as the law of the land. There is a narrow area as to what we do immediately. One narrow area is don't accept the plan. Please don't accept the plan. File a review. Let's see what happens now. And I hope that in this ridiculous reference to the seven-judge bench on religion and secularism, I hope you have another review. I sincerely hope that this onerous doctrine called we protect only the essential practices of the faith, I hope that onerous doctrine will be modified. We protect every part of the faith, not what the judges choose. And there have been two revolutions on this. Conservative revolution. The Jaising and Dissent one, in which he declared everybody guilty. Unless you're a Christian, you're all Hindus. Hey, Swami Narayan are telling you for God's sake, we don't want to be Hindus. None of you are Hindus. The second was the Hindutva judgment, as it continues. Okay? Now, that is an arena of struggle. To convert an arena of injustice into justice is precisely what is said in the Constitution.
Yes, please. Yes.
You spoke about the Constitution as being one of love and now one of hate. Do you think that there has been a lot of fear among a lot of groups that the Constitution will get changed or amended based on the right-wing hate because we don't believe in the Constitution as it has been implemented in the country? So my question to you is that when you talk about the Constitution that will be implemented today, do they really need to change the Constitution, or do you think that there is enough fascist elements within the Constitution? So if it survives as it stands and maybe get re-energized when the public actually understands?
I have a supplementary to the same system. Go ahead. My problem is, like, when you say we have no choice but to accept this Constitution, and you are actually proposing opening this whole thing, in the current scenario, don't you foresee a situation with already the RSS and the bulk of BJP leadership in their heart of hearts do not accept this Constitution? Once we open this Pandora's box, don't you give a window to those people to actually amend it and make it worse? Let me answer that question first and then I'll come to it. You see, the reason why I accept this Constitution is because if we were to devise a new one, we would fail. This takes me to the second part of my faith. The faith gets dented from time to time. And I ask myself that although this is a bourgeois constitution, my difference, actually Anil and I are at one of this, does it have enough liberal elements
for us to explore? If the answer is no, then the dictatorship that exists now is there. How do you find it? Why the dictatorship? We can answer that. Therefore, as presently advised, and remember, I am looking at this constitution, and that's the title of my talk, Constitution 2019. That's a big talk, so, will the Constitution be abused? It is being abused. Okay? Will there be amendments? There will be amendments, in a sense. The most ghastly one has already taken place by a very devious process on the 5th, 6th, and 8th of August. How are we going to fight it? One view is, don't have faith in the Constitution. At present, in 2019, we have to make the draw. Right? And I have never said it. It's going to be, and that is why, in a sense, there must be some element of togetherness. And you know, at the end of war and peace, the bad people can get together. Only good people can get together.
मैं आपसे अभी सवाल करूंगा बहुत क्लियरली मुझे उसका जवाब दीजिए क्योंकि मैं
क्या
अंग्रेजी में जाती हूँ
जवाब है यस बताने में बोलिए
मेरा सवाल ये है क्या इस फैसले के बाद जो भी डिस्प्यूटेड मैटर कोर्ट में चल रहे हैं वादन कामों के बारे में खासतौर से मुस्लिम मतलब काशी वगैरह इस तरह का बहन डाला जा रहा है कि अब कोई मुकदमा नहीं चलेगा रूलिंग जरा इसको विधान से बता
देखिए जहाँ तक ये संविधान का इंटरप्रिटेशन है इसमें एक रिलीजियस वर्शिप एक्ट था 1991 उस रिलीजियस वर्शिप एक्ट में ये लिखा था कि 15 अगस्त को एक लाइन लगाई था और 15 अगस्त के पहले जो मॉन्यूमेंट है सब प्रोटेक्टेड होंगे इसमें कुछ नहीं इसमें एक जो है इसमें नुक्स हालांकि इन्होंने कहा है ये बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर है ये वर्शिप एक्ट को हम प्रोटेक्ट करते हैं पर जहां तक ये है इसमें इनका प्रश्न वो किसी और से बातचीत कर लेंगे वो ठीक है कि क्या ये एक्ट को ये रिपीट कर सकते हैं जो प्रोटेक्शन सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने दी है और सबको वो प्रोटेक्शन एक मेजॉरिटेरियन पार्लियामेंट को और आप एक और बात करें क्या ये माहौल जो है ये चलता रहेगा उसका जवाब नहीं है ये माहौल चलता रहेगा इसीलिए तो हम कह रहे हैं हमारी संविधान जो है और हमारा पॉलिटिक्स जो है एक स्ट्रगल कराएगी यही है आजादी का टाइम यही आजादी का देखिए जब तक फैशिज्म रहेगा आपको लड़ना तो लड़ना और फैशिज्म सिर्फ ऊपर से नहीं आता हर गांव में फैशिज्म होता है अब देखिए क्या रिपोर्ट अभी आई है दलित को फेवर में क्या किया तमिलनाडु उन्होंने कहा व्यक्ति अब एक हफ्ते पहले की बात क्या उन्होंने कहा अब यूरिन दीजिए और उनके मुंह में यूरिन डाला तो ये फैशिज्म जो है ये फैशिज्म सिर्फ ऊपर का नहीं है यही तो मैं आपको जो मसला सुना रहा था सिंफोनिया पाक का यही वही मसला दुख है हमको प्रश्न ये है कहाँ लड़ी जाएगी और कैसे लड़ी जाएगी, इसका जवाब नहीं दिया।
Sir, एक small question.
Yes, sir.
The nation will always remain elected to mainly for argument, not for argument, but political argument. Were you shocked having it 5-0, or were you expecting it something else?
It is not for me to say, and please don't give me credit for non-history. I was associated with the states in 1994, and I stayed with it. Okay? I don't want any kudos for it, and when people ask me what were you fighting for, I said myself. I was fighting for a cause of which the minority is proud. Therefore, I really don't want to pat on the back for doing what I believe. Right? As far as the 5-0 is concerned, from the body language of the judges, it became clear, all these people are here, that we were moving towards 5-0. Very early in the day, one question asked of me, how can we save the Hindu case from limitation? Questioner, Justice Dhananjay from the case.
सर मैं आदाब करता हूँ और सलाम करता हूँ आपकी जुर्रत को जी, क्योंकि आप तारीख और हिस्ट्री के अंदर याद किए जाएंगे। जब तक ये दुनिया कायम रहेगी आपका नाम बाकी रहेगा, क्योंकि आपने ऐसी बाजी खेली है। मैं उसी के ऊपर मैंने कुछ अशआर लिखे हैं आपकी तारीफ में कि अलम इंसाफ का लेकर चले हैं, अलम यानी झंडा, अलम इंसाफ का लेकर चले हैं, बहुत से तीर नफरत के चले हैं, लगा दी जान की बाजी हक के खातिर, लगा दी जान की बाजी हक के खातिर, जहां में ऐसे हीरे कम मिले हैं। और आखिरी शेर यह है कि फख्र इंसाफ को होगा वहीं पर, फख्र इंसाफ को होगा वहीं पर जहां राजीव जैसे कद खड़े हैं।
मान्यवर हिंदी में बोलूंगा मैं। आप कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन और कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के बारे में बहुत बोले, आप मेरा ये विषय नहीं है। इतिहास का विद्यार्थी होने के नाते स्टूडेंट कंपेरेटिव स्टडीज इन एवोल्यूशन ऑफ हिस्ट्री, तो मैं इसको हिस्टोरिक वे में थोड़ा मेरी अपनी चिंता प्रकट करना चाहता हूँ। मेरी चिंता विषय है, मेरी चिंता बाबरी मस्जिद को हमने कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन जोड़कर इसको एक विषय बनाया। आज 27 साल हो गए और ये थमने का नाम नहीं लेगा, कितने साल और चलेगा। किस लेवल पर पिच पर पिच बदलती गई है, अभी किस पिच पर ये रहेगा कुछ जानते हैं। जब बाबरी मस्जिद गिरी थी उस समय मैं आपके और ऑडियंस के इंफॉर्मेशन के लिए आपको बताना चाहता हूँ, हजारों मस्जिदें हजारों मंदिर उस वक्त डेमोलिशन हुए, नास्तनाबूद कर दिए गए, उनकी जड़ें उखाड़ दी गई, दूसरे देशों में रुके। ये फैक्ट लोगों को पास नहीं है कि ये भी हुआ। मंदिर भी और मस्जिद भी इसी दौरान में खत्म कर दिए गए हमेशा के लिए और कुछ डेमोलिशन कर दिए गए। ये भी लोगों को पता होना चाहिए। हम एक ही मस्जिद की बात कर रहे हैं, यहाँ और मंदिर और मस्जिद और भी हुए। ये एक है, ये अननोन की बात कर रहे हैं। दूसरा, हमारे देश में लाखों मस्जिदें हैं और लाखों मंदिर हैं, सिलसिला चला आ रहा है और ये हिंदू और मुसलमान की बात चल रही है। लेकिन मैं ये कह रहा था, जो यहाँ के मूल निवासी थे, मूल निवासी मतलब आदिवासी, जिनकी हम संतान है, वो हमारे पूर्वज थे। इस दौरान में उन नहीं है कि मैं संक्षिप्त में से खत्म करता हूँ। हमें इस मसले में करना दिया गया, हमें मूल प्रश्न से हटा दिया गया। कहने का अर्थ ये है, अगर ये सिलसिला एक मस्जिद का है तो यहाँ तो लाखों मस्जिद में मंदिर पड़े हैं। ये कब तक चलेगा जब कि इंसान दूसरे ग्रहों पर जा रहा है। हम क्या कक्षाएं ढूंढ रहे हैं, हम प्लैनेट ढूंढ रहे हैं, दुनिया उधर जा रही है और हम सिर्फ पृथ्वी पर लगे हुए। थैंक यू। मैं समझता हूँ
एक तो आपने विदेशों की बात की, जहाँ पे नहीं, अब ये फिलहाल में अभी जब मस्जिद की बात करवाई और आप कोई भी पुस्तक में देखें 6 दिसंबर 1992 इंडिया की जो रेपुटेशन थी एक सेक्युलर डेमोक्रेसी बिल्कुल खत्म हो गए। आप कोई भी किताब पढ़िए, क्या कहते हैं, और आप कहते हैं अरे ये तो विदेश है, अंग्रेज है, सबको मतलब हम लोग कहते हैं ये जो रेपुटेशन है ये सेक्युलर नेशनलिज्म से वापस आया है। ये जो चोट पड़ी है हमारी फॉरेन पॉलिसी पे और हमारी फॉरेन इमेज, ये चोट। दूसरी बात ये है कि अब क्या होगा आगे। एक पॉलिटिशियन है जिनके लिए मुझे कोई रिस्पेक्ट नहीं, उनका नाम है उन्होंने एक कॉन्फ्लिक्ट निकाली है और ये मीडिएशन कमेटी को कहा कि 519 ऐसे मस्जिद हैं जिसके नीचे आपको कंप्लेंट मिलेगा। आप इंडिया को डेवलप करना चाहते हैं, जब पंडित नेहरू को पता चला जनरल मस्जिद टूट रहे थे, उन्होंने ऑर्डर दिया कि दिल्ली का जो मस्जिद है जनरल आर्मी के साथ जाएंगे और वो रिस्टोर है। उन्होंने कहा नहीं होगा, इसमें क्या होगा मैं बता। उन्होंने ऑर्डर दिया पंडित नेहरू ने चीफ सेक्रेटरी उस समय थे भगवान साहब। उसके बाद एक व्यक्ति के मिनिस्टर थे के नायर जो लेकर बीजेपी में जो जनसंघ की उसकी शादी हो सकता है हो सकता है। अगर आप एक पॉलिसी में देखें तो वो पंडित नेहरू की पॉलिसी कि जहां भी है आप उसको वापस करें। क्यों नहीं किया ना महाराज बताइए, कल्याण सिंह ने क्यों नहीं वापस किया? एक नतीजा था, आप इसको रीबिल्ड करेंगे फिर देश उसके बाद नहीं हुआ। तो जब मैं कहता हूँ एरिना ऑफ स्ट्रगल सब जगह, के नायर भी एरिना ऑफ स्ट्रगल, उन्होंने जानते हो क्या भगत सिंह की और किसी और की उन्होंने ऊपर फोटो डाल दी सेंट्रल के पास। उन्होंने कहा ये एक्चुअली ये तो हरकतें हो रही थी जब वो तो अगर आप कहेंगे ये होगा, हाँ होगा, तो होना पड़ेगा, हाँ होना पड़ेगा, और पूरा कानून के हक में। क्योंकि जो आपको नोटा दे दिया जा रहा है वो नोटा कानूनी नोटा नहीं, उसका जवाब भी हो सकता है।
I'm really going to speak about this, but I think it's also my duty. I'm living in South Delhi, where a death occurred in my family. I went to the Ayodhya man. I said, he told me that all the deaths and births now, you have to go to the Ram Mandir, the local Ram Mandir, and there the Satina will go from there. So I refused to do that. And I said, it's only for me, no, for everyone. The other thing is that, one thing your prayer was not necessarily enough.
I'll do my best. Can you hear me? Okay, so you heard the earlier part. I don't have to repeat myself, right? That that there was a death in my family, and when I went to the watchman, he said, you have to go to the Ram Mandir. I have protested. I have not been quiet. Found that the local RWA head, who is a BJP guy, he refused to take the RWA subscription from me. Okay? So basically, I'm out of the RWA. And when we had a meeting and I reached there, I found there were so many people, like it was a huge mandir lineup. And there was a speech going on which says, he said कि जब से यहाँ राम मंदिर का विकास हुआ है तब से हर गेट पर कमल का फूल खिला है. So I said, let this lady who wants to speak, and I just said to this guy, and an aside, I'm not speaking on a mic, I'm not on the podium. I just said, he said he's speaking, I said bullshit. That's all I said. That is all I said. 5 guys came to lynch me. I ran for my life. Okay? I'm still not a member of the RWA, and I've decided I'm not going to that meeting, okay? What I'm trying to say is that those of us who believe in secularism and who want to practice it, it's becoming very, very difficult on the ground. And I'm giving you eyewitnessing of something. I'm a writer, I'm a journalist. I live in Delhi. So the situation is macabre. That is what I want to share.
For many people, it is dream of the year.
And all the RWA forms are still only from the Ram Mandir. You have to go to the Ram Mandir and then you will get the RWA form.
When I was arguing the case, I said what you have done has been done by Hindu parents. Okay? Next week they came back, and had it not been for these 2 years, I think the people would also have been. They came as close to lynching me before.